A continuación, conferencia que será impartida por Sabby Gill, el CEO de Thomas International. ¿Cómo desbloquear el potencial de cada individuo? Los va a recibir Jorge Monsalve como coanfitrión.
Juan Carlos, muchas gracias y bienvenidos a todos a esta maravillosa tarde de conferencias y una felicitación extensiva a todo el equipo de tu empresa, Juan Carlos, por ese talento humano que tienes allá. Les damos la bienvenida a todos. Mi nombre es Jorge Monsalve. Como mencionaba Juan Carlos, el mundo ha cambiado mucho y esto nos ha llevado el día de hoy a estar en estos escenarios virtuales que a veces nos pueden golpear, pero bueno, bienvenidas a estas nuevas experiencias. Para mí es muy grato ser el coanfitrión y darle la bienvenida a nuestro expositor principal, Sabby Gill. Sabby Gill asumió como CEO de Thomas International el pasado 1 de octubre de 2020. Para Thomas International, como empresa, es el principal proveedor de plataformas de evaluación de talento. En Thomas creen en liberar el potencial de cada individuo, equipo y organización, haciendo que la complejidad del comportamiento humano, la aptitud y la personalidad sea más fácil de entender. Con sus plataformas de evaluación del talento humano, ayudan a organizaciones de todo tipo y por todas partes del mundo a transformar el desempeño de sus personas mirando más allá de sus habilidades y la experiencia para liberar su potencial y el potencial de su gente. Thomas Gill, antes de ser nombrado como CEO de Thomas International, también dirigió la empresa Sabby como director gerente en el Reino Unido e Irlanda. Durante más de 34 años ha aportado gran experiencia en el sector de las tecnologías en ventas, servicio, soporte, operaciones y éxito del cliente, con una experiencia significativa trabajando en el ecosistema de canales y socios internacionales. Anteriormente, dentro de su experiencia, también ayudó a puestos seniors en Epicor Software, donde ocupó también el puesto de vicepresidente ejecutivo internacional. También fue vicepresidente senior de ventas internacionales para IGT, una empresa de tecnología de juegos, y puestos de gestión ejecutiva en Hewlett Packard, CA Technologies, Oracle, PeopleSoft y Digital Equipment Corporation. Sabby Gill también fue recientemente vicepresidente del Conferencia of British Industries en el este del Reino Unido, miembro de la Junta Tech UK y actualmente es miembro del Consejo de Economía Digital del Reino Unido con el secretario de Estado. También ha desempeñado un papel activo en el apoyo a varias organizaciones benéficas y fundaciones. Anteriormente fue mentor del programa Peter Jones Tycoon y el programa Veteran Tycoon Enterprise. También fue incluido nombrado como una de las personas más influyentes en el noroeste del Reino Unido en el año 2019. Peter, welcome to this auditorium. We have a great number of people who will be listening to your conference. We are very happy to have you here and welcome, and the auditorium is yours. Al final, I forgot to mention something. Sorry. Para el auditorio, la conferencia será realizada en el idioma en inglés. En la parte de abajo de las herramientas de Zoom, ustedes van a encontrar ahí un globo donde pueden encontrar la interpretación en cualquiera de los idiomas que ustedes deseen, o pueden escucharla directamente al idioma inglés. Al final de la conferencia de Sabby habrá un espacio para preguntas en donde yo serviré como moderador. Y pues la idea es que no nos pasemos de las 2:59 para entrar a las próximas conferencias. Sorry, Sabby, so the auditorium is yours.
Jorge, thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here. And I apologize in advance for my lack of language skills that I have had to do this in English. What I'm going to do is first introduce myself, as Jorge has done. And it gives me great pleasure to be here. I wish I could have been there in person. The pandemic has stopped that, but I hope to be there to celebrate the 26th, 30th, and 35th anniversary of what is a great, great partner for us in the business. What I'm going to do is just share some slides that I have prepared. So hopefully you can see these come up. Can you see the slides? Jorge?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent, thank you. Let me just make sure so I can see it on my window here as well. So firstly, thank you again for taking the time out of your schedules to see that and spend time with me today. It really gives me great pleasure to do this presentation, and I'm just going to make sure that you've got the right view. Is that showing the presentation, or is that showing my?
It's fine. We are looking your presentation.
Perfect. So as I mentioned, it gives me great pleasure to be here. What I wanted to do was firstly just share some thoughts about Thomas International. So Thomas International was founded this year. We're actually celebrating our 40-year anniversary. We have over 32,000 clients.
Sorry, Sabby, the presentation, we are looking only 70% of the slide.
Okay, let me see if there is, let me just try and stop sharing and share that again. Is that better?
Yeah, but excellent. Thank you.
So Thomas has been around for over 40 years. This year, we actually celebrate our 40-year anniversary. We have more than 32,000 clients globally, growing every day. Over 23 million assessments are taken with Thomas tools on an annual basis. We have operations and representation in 60 countries with customers in twice that globally. We have over 56 languages supported through our network and ecosystem. And our vision at Thomas is, and one reason why I joined the company back in October 2020, is at Thomas, we believe in a higher purpose, a world of higher human achievement through a greater understanding of ourselves and each other. So how do we do that? What we do is we combine technology, psychology, and data to translate people's diverse characteristics in very easy to understand, easy to action solutions that are accessible to everyone for their across recruitment, across retention, and across learning and development decisions. At Thomas, we believe it is about unlocking the potential of every individual, team, and organization by making the complex nature of human behavior, aptitude, and personality easier for everyone globally to understand. Our talent assessment platform helps organizations of all types around the world transform their performance through smarter people decisions, looking beyond just skills and experience. So what does that mean? When we think about the importance of the different components of trying to think about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, we think about the most important thing is around bias and having either unconscious bias or having a bias. Stereotypes, assumptions, all of those types of things are what we refer to as applied social psychology. What's the easiest way of defining that? It can be defined as using things like psychological theories, principles, research findings, and experimental methods to understand social issues and then to offer real-world solutions for those problems. So if we think about the disciplines around applied psychology functions, it's all about what's at the heart. It's caused by human behavior. To understand and change these human behaviors, we have to examine individuals' thoughts, individuals' feelings, and individuals' behaviors as they pertain to a variety of social influences. It's through our research with our partners and academia and all of our networks that through that research, we provided tools and interactions that help us understand and suggest ways of improving that human social behavior, especially within the workplace. If we look at it as a basic science aimed at understanding human social behavior and the motivations, cognitions, and emotions related to such behavior, for example, social psychologists try to understand why people so easily give in to social pressure, why people often seem insensitive to the needs of others, why people become aggressive, why people like each other, or why people are unhappy, even though they seem or have everything going for them. When you think about the different types of behaviors and biases, and if we think specifically around unconscious bias, this is how we link it together. There are two systems and two different ways of thinking. We talk about typical recruitment process. They are fully biased or based on system one way of thinking, basing decisions on gut feel, interviews, and then using CVs. Whereas system two takes more time, so people don't want to do, or what they don't want to do is invest their time. If you click with a person, it is easier, but it is also potentially biased. This is how our brain has evolved, because under system one, thinking allows us to, for example, identify dangers quickly. We cannot spend our lives in system two, thinking because we wouldn't survive. However, it doesn't mean that system one decisions are always correct. Strategies to eliminate unconscious bias aren't going to work because it would be eliminating the effects of evolution. This is why unconscious bias training does not necessarily always work. But unconscious bias awareness training could help. If it's long-term practical outcomes, research-backed, then it can work. What we can do is introduce objective processes to minimize bias. You can change people easily, but you can change processes far easier. So when we think about the psychometrics of organizations, and we think about what is unconscious bias, in simple terms, unconscious bias happens outside our conscious awareness. This bias is typically a learned stereotype that's automatic and mostly unintentional. And that's the reason why when we think about things like D&I and the importance of diversity and inclusion in all organizations, we have to think about that in the context of several different environments. So when you think about recruitment, you think about onboarding, identifying all the high potential employees that you have within your organization. You think about the personal and leader development that you have within your organization and team development. It's okay to think about all of these elements like psychometrics for D&I, but if you think about how easy is it for the individual to be involved, to be biased towards an individual, an organization, or a person. And that's the reason why, for us, when we think about the topic of how do you unlock the potential of individuals, the most important thing is ensuring that individuals involved in those processes don't have unconscious bias. So when you think about what that means, is what is unconscious bias? In simple words, it's about outside conscious awareness. This bias is typically a learned stereotype that's automatically and mostly unintentional. You must have heard the saying that we are all prejudiced towards something. It's an unsettling thought to think about, especially if you're someone who is an advocate of equality, especially when you think about an advocate for diversity and inclusion. However, psychologists have stated that prejudice is something we have in all of us. From a psychology standpoint, it's not an entirely bad thing. Prejudice has helped humankind survive during primordial time because we needed to be quick thinking about what dangers to avoid. Bias is a form of prejudice that favors or is against a something, a person, or a group. This prejudice against these factors is usually unfair. When they're compared to one another, bias can exist in an individual, in a group, or in an institution. There are two types of bias: conscious bias or unconscious bias. These biases can happen towards anything, not just race or ethnicity, though these two are the most well documented. Bias may exist towards gender, physical disabilities or disabilities, weight, sexual orientation, religion, and various other characteristics. Unconscious bias happens outside our conscious awareness. This bias is typically a learned stereotype that's automatic and mostly unintentional. Unconscious bias can be so systematically ingrained that it can alter our behavior and how we interact with the people around us. Many studies believe that unconscious bias happens automatically as our brain makes quick decisions based on its past experiences. Often, unconscious bias results in a negative consequence. People have been penalized and their benefits have been taken away due to unconscious bias, even though we have biases wired into us. Unconscious bias is usually more directed towards minority groups. The factors influencing this unconscious bias are typically focused on social class, race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, gender, and nationality. So what are the different types of unconscious bias that we all encounter in the workplace? There are several types, and let's just talk about some of them. You can have affinity bias. This is a tendency to like someone similar to us in terms of our gender, race, ethnicity, or nationality. You have attribution bias. This happens when we attribute certain notions to a person because of our prior interactions with and the observations of another person, maybe because of their gender, race, or sexual orientation. Ageism. We make assumptions and commit bias based on a person's age, while age is not a measure of someone's intelligence or maturity. We unconsciously judge them based on this. Confirmation bias. The inclination happens when we want something or someone to confirm our bias towards them. Conformity bias. This is also known as peer pressure. We want to conform to the people or things around us, even though they contradict our personal beliefs and principles. You have the halo effect. This happens when we unconsciously put someone on a pedestal just because there's something about them we find impressive. You have the horns effect, the opposite of halo effect. We unconsciously dislike everything about someone because they have some negative characteristics we just don't like. Contrast bias. You compare one or several things you come in contact with to another similar thing, which can happen simultaneously or consecutively. Then you think about the most common one, gender bias. This common gender bias happens when one gender is favored over another because of stereotypes or based on your previous experience. Something to consider here is when we talked about affiliation bias, men tend to have more affiliation to other men when they're looking for jobs or through recruitment processes. That's a bias that we have to try and avoid and stop. Name bias. You make an unconscious judgment based on a person's name, especially the ones that are of foreign origins. The beauty bias, another common bias where we unconsciously assume attractive people are more content, qualified, and successful. But then let's think about the unconscious bias examples. That can happen in everyday situations, regardless of where we are. We don't just make unconscious bias when something or someone is right in front of us. We can even commit by hearing about someone or something over the radio or watch it on television. We assume someone is naturally incompetent at something just because we know where they're from or which neighborhood they grew up in. We believe someone will behave in a certain way because of how we saw some people of the same race as him or her behave. As you can see, unconscious bias can manifest in many ways and in countless situations. It's up to us to identify it so we realize we're biased towards something, or someone. And that's how you are able to unlock the power of individuals, not be biased towards them just because of their background, because of what their CV says. What tools allow you to do, like Thomas, and all of these different personality, behavior, aptitude elements, it takes the bias away. It's the unconscious bias. You think about unconscious bias, especially in the workplace. One of the most common situations where unconscious bias usually happens is in the workplace. Many people have lost opportunities to excel simply because they were the victims of unconscious bias. As professionals, we need to be constantly aware of the potential biases so we're not prejudiced towards anyone just because they're different from us. Employers and interviewers need to be objective and evaluate someone based on their merits and their skill sets. Prejudice may be hardwired into all of us as part of our survival instinct, but we need to be the bigger person and not let it cloud or run our judgment. We don't like it when someone judges us just because of how we look or because we have an unfamiliar name. So we also need to stop doing the same to others. So let's change the process and make everything more objective. An example you'll hear about in a session that's going to be taking place shortly after this is a session which is Women in Business, which is being run by some of my colleagues. So again, what we need to make sure is about educating staff to ensure that we embed inclusivity and respect for difference into all of these different processes within your organizational DNA. It has to be beyond bystanding. We have to instill an upstander ethos in our teams and in your teams. We have to secure the buy-in into the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion at all levels within the organization. So what does that mean? 85% of CEOs whose organizations have a diversity, equality, and inclusion strategy say it has enhanced business performance. A lack of inclusivity and unconscious bias in your decision-making processes is harmful. It is harmful to your business, and it prevents you from hiring and keeping genuine talent. It potentially disables your ability to unconsciously and consciously uncover great talent within your organization. It's important to talk about all types of diversity. It's not only about gender. It's about race, background, disability, sexuality, neurodiversity, personality, hierarchical levels, and more and more and more. It's not just the basics that people think about. It's not just morally beneficial, it's absolutely key. And you can see from here, it's how important that organizations that have done this outperform industry averages. Diverse senior management teams are more likely to introduce product, system, and process innovations within their organization. Diversity in teams, probably one of the most important ones, leads to more scrutiny and ultimately better decision-making. If you think about the last time you asked a team or an individual or a group a set of questions, and if you ask the same team from similar backgrounds, like a sales organization, and then you asked a marketing organization, the chances are you'll get very similar answers. But put the sales and marketing team together and ask the question, you'll more than likely get diverse opinions more thought going into the decisions, and coming out with a stronger process and a stronger way and diverse way of thinking. It's what we all refer to as the diversity of thought within an organization. We should then think about why assessments so key within an organization. This is a slide that helps explain why clients should care about psychometric assessments. It's a great opportunity to remember that diversity and inclusion, which is already identified as a key concern for many companies, is important. Assessments, also known as we referred to earlier, as psychological or psychometric assessments, give you a deeper insight into a person and people than a CV, more than a LinkedIn profile, more than an online application from someone might otherwise reveal. You want to reveal their motivations, why they behave the way they do, their potential, how do they communicate, how do they like to be communicated with and to. They can support your recruitment process and general management of people to enable you to make smarter, better informed decisions that are guided by data, not just gut feelings. The insight that assessments give helps you to reduce bias in your people processes, as well as increasing diversity and inclusion within your organization. All the essential things to create a great business. Landmark research from the American Psychology Association, done by Frank Schmidt and John Hunter back in 1998, reviewed 85 years of research and found that higher cognitive ability, or general intelligence, as it's also called, as measured by the Thomas Aptitude Assessment, is directly linked to higher employee productivity and performance in role. This makes it essential to any recruiter or any employer to measure the aptitude of their staff and candidates to ensure they put the right people in the right roles and make the best use of all of their people behaviors. So the most important thing now is, so what are the various Thomas tools that we have available to us? If you look at these, on the outer circle, it talks about those particular measures of behavior. So we have behaviors, you have personality and emotion, aptitude, the engagement level of an employee within your organization. What is the personality and potential of that individual? And there's also a competency way of checking individuals and how well are they perceived within the organization. These are all of the different tools and assessments that are available to you now within Thomas. How to unlock the potential of every individual and understanding what makes a person tick. It's so important to make sure that all of these different elements and the correlation between all of these is understood. You hopefully understand why it's so important to look beyond the CV, beyond the LinkedIn profile, beyond the individual. If most people were hired based on that, based on their experiences, what you will find is that you'll probably hire somebody who's got all of the techniques and all of the processes from the companies they've come from. Not necessarily, if they don't have a willingness to learn and a willingness to compete, they may not be the right individuals for your organization. So these assessments are absolutely key for everybody to understand and move forward with. As I mentioned, one of the other sessions that's going on straight after this is a Women in Business in Latin America, which is being run by two of my colleagues, Carmen and Laura. A great opportunity to give you more insights into some research that we've done using these different assessment techniques and doing the research that we've done to find out how women in business are perceived, what are the differences, specifically in Latin America. And what I'd like to finally leave you with is a summary, a conclusion. Prejudice may be hardwired into us as part of our survival instinct, but we need to be the bigger person and not let it cloud or run our judgment. We don't like it when someone judges us just because of how we look or because we have an unfamiliar name. So we all need to stop doing the same to others. So let's change the process and make everything more objective. Again, thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate being here. I hope, again, that I'm going to be there in person for next year's event. But with that, what I'd like to do now is, Jorge, open it up to see if there are any questions, and I'm more than happy to do that in the final few minutes before we hand back.
Claro que sí, Sabby, muchas gracias. Muy ilustrativa esta conferencia, muy importante. Un abrebocas para las próximas conferencias especializadas. Sabby, hay una pregunta que dice, ¿cómo pueden afectar los sesgos inconscientes el lugar de trabajo?
Sorry, Jorge, was that a question for me?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't see the translation come up.
Put it in English, Sabby.
Jorge, sorry.
La pregunta es, ¿cómo pueden afectar los sesgos inconscientes el lugar de trabajo?
Jorge, sorry, the question didn't come up in English.
Okay, no problem. Okay. This topic is really interesting. Yeah. What are you doing at Thomas to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, excellent. Great question. I apologize for that. Look, we're doing several things. As I mentioned earlier in one of my slides, it is about ensuring that everything that we do is in the DNA of the organization. So when I think about recruitment, one of the things that we've done within the organization is that we've made sure that we use our own tools in the recruitment process so that there is no bias towards individuals or people based on their CVs or their data, right? So we do a lot of screening to try and make sure that we're not biased towards any particular individual person, and we try and do anonymized as much as possible. The other things that we've also done specifically around ensuring that, for example, from a gender perspective, we've made sure that women are in the final selection process. So wherever we can ensure that not only do we, when we do the CV and the screening and we start doing the candidate screening, we try and make sure that we have an equal share of individual diversity within the teams. On my senior leadership team, recently we've now just hired a new head of customer success for global, a mother who's just recently had a baby. She's coming to work for us. So it's great to have individuals who are coming from, that environment where, returning mothers back to work again, right? Taking very senior positions. So for us, it's really key to have it, as you as I mentioned earlier, but really key to have it within the DNA of our organization.
Muchas gracias, Sabby. Otra pregunta de Gabriela. A question from Gabriela. How can we support the other leaders during the recruiting process to make sure that bias are not affecting their judgment of the candidate? La pregunta es, ¿cómo podemos apoyar a los otros líderes durante el proceso de reclutamiento para que los prejuicios no afecten su juicio con respecto a los candidatos?
That's a great question. Look, I think the important thing here is you do need to try and use tools that allow you to be able to perform that unconscious bias and remove that element of it, or of that around that biased nature, without using, because the thing you have to be careful of is it's so easy you could anomalize information. Just even I've seen it before where people have taken CVs, they've taken just the names off, they take the gender off, they've taken all of that, but based on the way people write their CVs, the way that data is stored and the way that it's represented, it's very easy to see information and be able to tell which gender they've come from based on, even down to education and schooling and those sort of things. So again, I think the use of tools, use of assessment tools, use of those types of things really do make the difference. And that's the reason why, we are at Thomas working and real big advocates and want to carry on talking about this all the time, because we're strong believers that having this and the importance of diversity in any organization, and we've shown it and the results speak for themselves, where, at the senior level, at the business level, at the performance level, diversity of individuals, inclusion, the diversity of thought in leadership teams and management teams show you how easy it is to make those types of decisions. And once you've made them, how successful you can be. But it's the use of tools, it's the use of unconscious or unbiased tools and processes which will make the difference.
Muchas gracias, Sabby. Una última pregunta, nos queda un minuto. Last question, as we have only 1 minute, from Diva. ¿Cómo pueden afectar los sesgos inconscientes el lugar de trabajo? How can unconscious bias affect the workplace?
Yeah, look, it does affect the workplace, more so than anybody I think would ever have taken into account. These pieces that I mentioned earlier around, because of all of those different components that I mentioned, affiliation, gender, religion, where somebody went to school, where somebody lives, which neighborhood, which region they came from. As soon as people start understanding, they stereotypically put people in a particular type of profile. And what we've got to do is, that's the bit that we have to stop. We have to stop assuming that we know individuals just because of where they have come from or where their background or what their surname is. And that's the reason why to remove it, you have to start really setting in processes, setting in structures, making it part of the DNA of every organization, using these types of tools that Thomas and provide to take that away. It's only when you do that that you really get to a point that you'll see the performance, right? It's proven, it's seen, it's shown that performance of organizations that take this seriously outperform any other organizations within their same industry, same sectors, exponentially. So I think that's a huge opportunity for all organizations.
Sabby, muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Sabby. Sorry that the time goes so fast. We need to continue and move on with the next presentation. Para nuestro auditorio, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Sabby.